Anybody who is paying attention could see the tensions rising, the way that far-right organizers were playing on local people's fears in order to promote more and more violent demonstrations taking place outside of those hotels. They have become a lightning rod for the hatred that is being whipped up against migrants in this country. The government should have acted much sooner in order to avoid this completely disastrous situation that it finds itself in now, where, as we've just heard, other councils are going to try to take advantage of the same legal precedent.
You mentioned there the far right, but you would accept that many people came out to protest who had legitimate concerns. But
No,
I
I
mentioned
don't
there in the
accept
last
legitimate
interview,
concerns.
hang on a second, I mentioned in the last interview what the Refugee Council has said. Do you share that view about concerns about the climate that this is creating for people who are seeking asylum in this country?
Yes, and not just for people who are seeking asylum. We've seen at some of these demonstrations that any random non-white person passing by on the street is at risk of being attacked by these mobs at times. And we saw that last summer as well, where the violence spreads far beyond being directed just at asylum seekers. Not that it would be acceptable in any way, shape, or form, even if it was just directed at asylum seekers. But I do want to push back against your use of the phrase legitimate concerns. There has been a letter published today signed by 100 organizations that exist to support women and girls who have been raped or experienced sexual violence or domestic violence. That includes Rape Crisis England and Wales, the charity Refuge, the major charities that support women and girls who are actually facing violence. And they are making it absolutely clear that racism is being weaponized in order to whip up a distraction from the policies that will really protect women and girls and keep us safe.
Sure, it's not just that issue, is it, though? Because some of the councils are also talking about pressures on schools and all of that. That is what I'm talking about when I talk about legitimate concerns. In terms of what happens to these people now, what is your thought there in terms of what should the government actually do here?
Well, the government should act quickly to put people into accommodation in a model that is not for profit. Because one of the huge failures of the model that was introduced to house asylum seekers is that it is run for profit by private companies and private individuals. So individuals who own these hotels have been making an absolute fortune out of government contracts to house people in situations that are simply inappropriate, that are in many cases actually squalid, and are causing serious issues in terms of people's health and well-being. Instead, we should be running a not-for-profit asylum accommodation system where that money that is currently going into private hands to run these awful hotels is instead going into local authorities to ensure that they are creating the spaces in decent, dignified accommodation that is available to everybody, including asylum seekers and people from the local community who are in need of support, and to provide also the services that are so desperately needed. This is why I come back again, that it is not a legitimate concern if there are issues with service provision in your local area to go outside of an accommodation centre where homeless asylum seekers are being sheltered and to scream abuse at the people who are held inside. That is not a reflection of any legitimate political position whatsoever. It is the government's responsibility to ensure that there are services available to all of our communities.